Sucker has 6 razor claws that expand upon impact. Shred your mama's head like a cabbage. Keep it. On the house. Anyhow, I've been windjamming long enough. Why don't you boys tell me what you're looking for?
Hey everybody, and thank you for watching another video. My name is Murge, and you know what I find interesting about Walter White and the Salamancas? I don't think that he ever knew the kind of danger that he was actually in, because I know that he believes that
I am the danger.
But the Salamanca twins had an entire shrine dedicated to killing Walter, and not to mention that they were in his house on his bed with an axe waiting for him. And had Gus not intervened the way he did, the series would have ended with the Salamancas on top. And even with the target switched from Walter to Hank again, if Gus didn't make the call warning him, Hank's story would have ended that day in the parking lot. But what if it did? How would Hank being killed off earlier in the series change the Breaking Bad universe? Well, in this video, we're going to explore that very concept. And if you could leave a like on this video to support the channel, I'd appreciate it. Now, let's get into it. Hank lies on the ground bloodied and wounded from the twins' ambush, and is only given a moment to breathe after Marco decided that killing him with a gun would be too easy. But as Hank hears the sound of metal scraping against the pavement getting closer, he would struggle to load the hollow point bullet that was dropped earlier. And by the time the gun was loaded, Hank was just seconds too late, as Marco was already in mid-swing, hacking at his leg just above the knee, causing Hank to drop the gun and scream in agony. Marco lifts and swings the axe, hacking in the same area, but this time severing Hank's leg completely. And as he prepares to swing the axe again, he hears the police sirens approaching, momentarily distracting him, but just long enough for Hank to grab his gun. And when Marco goes to deliver the killing blow to Hank's chest, Hank would find the strength to lift his arm and squeeze the trigger, shooting Marco in the head, blowing out the back of his skull. But because he was already in mid-swing, the axe continues to fall, but the trajectory shifts, no longer aiming for his chest, but instead the axe lands directly in the middle of his face, killing Hank and nearly splitting his head in two. And when the police arrived, the only person they found alive was Lionel, who was maimed from the waist down. And as for Hank and Marco, let's just say that they're both getting the closed casket treatment. Meanwhile, just outside the hospital, Jesse waits for Skinny Pete while sitting in a wheelchair. But when he sees an ambulance pull in, he would get up to be nosy. But instead of seeing Hank like the original, he sees Lionel being handled by the paramedics. But Jesse having no idea on who that is, he would go back to his chair and begin smoking a cigarette until Skinny Pete pulls up. We then pick up with Walter in the middle of firing Gale, which may be the purest form of "it's not you, it's me" that I have ever seen.
I don't think either of us would necessarily benefit from a prolonged... yeah, so... yeah.
And when it's just Walter and Jesse, the two would cook a batch to familiarize Jesse with the new lab. And after the cook, as they're packaging the product, they would be visited by Victor, who tells Walter from upstairs, "You're needed at the hospital." And Walter says, "For what?" But Victor ignores him, making his way downstairs. "Hello, what's at the hospital?" Walter says, getting more frustrated as he's not being acknowledged. But Victor just puts the product on the dolly and wheels it away without saying a word. Jesse looks at Walter and says, "Mr. White, I don't know, maybe you should go to the hospital to see what's going on. Don't worry, I'll take care of cleanup over here." And Walter would leave Jesse at the lab to see why he's needed at the hospital. Walter arrives at the hospital and it is full of cops, but once he's spotted by Steve Gomez in the lobby, he would be escorted to the back with the rest of his family. And once he enters the room, he will be yelled at by Skyler and Walter Jr. saying, "Walt, where have you been? We've been calling you for hours." "I'm sorry, I've been having cell phone issues. I will get that fixed, but what's going on here? What happened?" Walter says while looking around the room as he spots Marie pacing back and forth in the background. "It's Hank. There was a cartel attack and he was brought here and..." Skyler says before breaking down in Walter's arms, unable to finish her sentence. "What, Skyler? What happened with Hank?" Walter says frantically, Hank's dead." Marie says, answering Walter in a dour tone before being comforted by Gomez. But she pushes him back before saying, "Don't touch me. Where were you, Steve, huh? Hank gets suspended and then 20 minutes later he ends up dead? And you..." Marie says, now directing her attention at Walter, "Had you not gotten involved with this Jesse Pinkman, Hank wouldn't have been in the shootout with this Salamanca guy and this whole thing wouldn't have even happened." Marie says, now nearly face to face with Walter, but Skyler tries to calm Marie down by saying, "Marie, that is not fair. I know you want to blame someone, but Walt and Steve, they have nothing to do with this." "I don't care, Skyler. I want you out. Steve, Walter, get out. I do not want you here. Get out." And the entire room is in shock at Marie's demands as they slowly walk towards the door, and Walter looks back at Skyler while she's hugging Marie and mouths the words, "I'll talk to her." And as they leave the room, Walter would ask Steve, "Is there anything else the DEA knows about the attack that you can tell me?" All we know right now is the only survivor's in critical condition, and based off his tattoos, it points to a drug cartel. But Hank, before he went down, he managed to take the bastard's legs. Gomez says with a half smile, "And where is the survivor?" Walter would hesitantly question, "We actually got him upstairs. You want to see what Hank did to him?" Gomez says now with a full smile, I mean, yeah, if I can. And as the two make it over to Lionel, they begin to notice that everyone's eating chicken, but not just any kind of chicken, the Los Pollos Hermanos chicken. And Gomez overhears one of the officers saying, Gustavo Fring personally brought food over here and he's feeding all the cops. He would then point Walter into the direction and says, it's straight down there, don't worry, I'll catch up. And as Walter begins to near the hospital room door, he would think to himself, why would Gus be here right now? But when he makes it to the door, he sees Lionel Salamanca lying in the hospital bed with both legs amputated. And once he lays eyes on Walter, he would hop out the bed and begin crawling towards the door. And Walter would watch in confusion behind the safety of the glass door while Lionel is being picked up and carried back to the hospital bed. And as Walter is making his way back into the lobby, he runs right into Gus. And seeing him right here, right now, worries him, mainly because up until this point, he had no idea that Gus knew about him and his DEA brother-in-law. And Walter would ask, so, you knew this whole time? And Gus simply says, I investigate everyone I do business with. A careful man would. I just don't understand. Is you being here, is this some kind of message? Walter would question. I am here supporting my community. I hide in plain sight, as do you. Now please accept my condolences for your brother-in-law, and rest assured that the man responsible for the attack, I'm told that it's unlikely that he'll survive the night. Now, thank me, and shake my hand. Gus says, leaving Walter shocked for a moment before grabbing his hand and saying, thank you again, Mr. Fring. And Gus leaves, fading into the crowd of police. Then suddenly the surrounding officers rush upstairs and go towards Lionel's hospital room to find him going into cardiac shock before suddenly flatlining. And unknown to Walter, Mike slipped right past him, putting a needle in a wastebox before leaving. A week after Hank's funeral, Marie ends up being placed in witness protection as a precaution just in case the cartel ever decides to finish the job. And as far as Walter and his family, they do their best to move past what happened with Hank to get back to a sense of normalcy, with Skyler still opting to buy the car wash to launder Walt's money. And after taking a few days off, Walter and Jesse would be invited to a meeting with Gus at the chicken farm. And once the two arrive, Gus decides to take Mike's advice and be upfront with him about the war that's coming with the cartel.
If you want this guy to produce again, why not just tell him? You're the only thing that stands between him and an axe in the head.
And Gus tells them everything from when he first started with the cartel and how he too had a loved one that was killed by a Salamanca, something that Walter can relate to. And Gus continues by saying, the Salamanca's day of reckoning is long overdue. Now I'm asking for your help to prevent any more casualties from happening. Which is something that Jesse is definitely on board with, especially with him losing both Jane and Combo recently. And Walter would just simply say, well then, let's get to work. And together a plan was made to eradicate the cartel, in which they are all aware of. And with this level of transparency, the partnership between Gus, Walter, and Jesse was strengthened by their mutual hatred for the Salamancas. Which I guess is kind of a running theme for Gus and his friends, because remember how he met Mike?
You hurt Hector when you robbed that truck. You hurt his business, his pride, quite effectively. And if you were to hurt him in the same manner again, I would not stand in your way.
But Gus wouldn't be Gus if he wasn't involved in some form of 4D chess, because what he didn't tell Walter is that the hit that was put on Hank was given by Gus himself, a move that was a necessary evil that had to happen in order to bring this partnership to life. And as for Jesse, Gus would have his trusted employees that have Tomas doing their killing for him relocated, and Tomas would be spared, preventing the whole full measure situation from happening. We pick up a few days later with Jesse and Gus returning from Mexico after Operation Bottle Popper, wink wink, and the two would meet up with Walter at the Casa Tranquila nursing home for one last piece of business to take care of, Hector Salamanca. And once everyone was in the same room, Hector gives a look of confusion and anger, not only for seeing Gus in his presence, but also Walter and Jesse, the three people he hates most in the world. And Gustavo would casually tell Hector that everyone in his family is dead as he shows him the necklace of Don Eladio, and Hector's anger would quickly turn into sadness as he's unable to now look at Gus in the face. Look at me, Hector, Gus demands with a firm tone, but Hector keeps avoiding eye contact. Walter would then hand Gus a syringe and Gus would say to Hector, last chance to look at me, Hector. But Hector would still refuse, and Gus would inject him with whatever death formula that Walter cooked up in that syringe. He would then put his hand on Hector's leg for the last time, and before walking away, he would plainly say, goodbye, Hector. And even when Gus is walking away, Hector's head still hangs low in shame. And within 24 hours, Gus would receive a call from Tyrus giving him the news that Hector Salamanca is officially dead. And from that moment on, Walter, Jesse, and Gus continue to make as much money as they can ever need, with no issues between each other and no enemies who would dare oppose their operation. And Gus was even able to expand internationally, working with Lydia. And all the way up until Walter's last days, he stayed cooking, because even though his family has more money than they can ever spend, Walter was the most fulfilled when he was cooking. And like he said,
I liked it. I was
good at it.
And after Walter's passing, Jesse and Gus have dinner and they discuss his future, and Gus gives him the choice by saying, I know your partnership with Walter was unique, and I can imagine with his passing you may want to pursue a different line of work, something that I would be welcome to, if that is what you want. Jesse looks at Gus and questions him, saying, so, if I wanted to be out, we'd be square? Jesse, you have more than earned my respect from everything that you've done. So if you want out, all I ask is that you train the replacement that I have for you to produce the same quality of product. Is that something that you can do? Jesse stops himself from laughing to say, yeah, that's something I can do. But question, is my replacement that guy with the sandals and the cargo shorts? Yes, his name is Gale and he starts tomorrow, Gus says with a straight face as he continues to eat the food that was prepared. And the dinner gets quiet after that, mainly because this is the equivalent of a 2 weeks notice, and even though Gus can be nice, him and Jesse are not friends. After a few cooks together, Gale was finally ready, and the business between Gus and Jesse is now officially concluded. And Jesse would be free to live the life that he's always wanted with Andrea and Brock, and him being clean and having all the money in the world, the three would start a new life in New Zealand in honor of his original plan to run off with Jane. And for the first time in his life, Jesse is excited to know what the future holds. Hey everybody, and thank you for watching another video. I really hope you enjoyed this version of Breaking Bad, where I let Jesse have the best ending a character could have in Breaking Bad, but unfortunately that ending comes at the cost of Hank maybe getting the worst death a person could have in Breaking Bad. But hey, that's just one of the infinite possibilities when it comes to the HeisenVerse. But now I want to hear from you guys. Did you like this story? Would you have done things differently? And what other stories would you like for me to cover? Whatever it is, let me know down below in the comments and I'll do my best to respond. Until then, my name is Murge. Later.